Testing 1, 2, 3. This will be the Community Redevelopment Agency Board meeting for December 3rd, 2014.
Morning, everyone. Good evening. I'd like to call to order Community Redevelopment Agency Board regular meeting, December 3rd, 2014, approximately 6 p.m. Will you please join me in a moment of silence in the pledge? And a pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, Executive Director's Report. You're on.
Thank you, Chairman. I do not have a specific report this evening, but I did want to welcome our new board member, Steve Osmer, and introduce him to our CRA board attorney, Cliff Shepard. He said, "Who is that?" So I figured I'd go ahead and introduce you to him. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from the board to the director? Okay. Moving on, agenda item 4, discuss take action on landscape improvements along A1A corridor.
Thank you, Chairman. John, did you want to present this item?
Basically, the direction that was provided to the beautification board was to look at landscaping along the A1A corridor outside of the A1A right-of-way. This way it could be done outside of the A1A project. It also went to the CRA advisory board, and they made some recommendations. What I did, since the recommendations are a little bit different from the beautification board to the advisory committee, I went ahead and put both of the recommendations in here. And if you got any questions, what I'm going to do is, Judy Kramer's here. She's the chair for the beautification board, and she's got a PowerPoint that she'd like to present.
And to just kind of give you a background, I would say 4 meetings ago, the CRA board, approved a $20,000 budget to do landscaping enhancements on the corridors that intersected with A1A, and very similar to the Elwood landscaping that's on both sides of the road by First Financial Wave. And so this is that project, and the beautification board had some recommendations, and then the CRA advisory committee had different recommendations. So unfortunately, you're going to have to decide on that. But we do have a beautification board member here to give you an update on the reasoning behind their recommendations.
Okay. I don't know if you have a copy of it, but we said...
Judy, excuse me, please. Is there a way to get a microphone to Judy?
Sure.
Thank you. And if you would, please make sure you speak into the mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
These things are all turned on.
That's okay. We sent a memo on to the Community Redevelopment Agency with our recommendation. And our first recommendation was that we don't believe any of these improvements should be done prior to FDOT completing their renovations on A1A. That, to us, would be just a total waste of plants and money. The selections that we researched, we did for salt tolerance, drought tolerance, height and width growth, for visibility issues, maintenance requirements, disease requirements, and some selections may not currently be on the accepted list for A1A, but they should be, and some of them are already being used. For instance, Pudica that we recommend is being used up in Scotty's Garden, up at Pelican Beach Park. and the Buccaneer palms are being used at the Grand Avenue beach access. We feel that Satellite Beach should be in the forefront of utilizing the acceptable Florida-friendly yards landscaping program promulgated by the University of Florida, which doesn't necessarily recommend strictly natives, but appropriate plants, the right plant in the right place. We were using 2 sites that we went out and personally inspected. One was on Magellan and the other one was on, I forget. Sunrise. And we went out and we kind of measured them and looked at whether there were swales involved, and that's another issue that we have to deal with. Some of these corners are not going to be appropriate for planting because of swales and visibility of owner signs and other things. And one of the things that we didn't have at our disposal were property lines. So we just kind of estimated where something or a planting could go. It's our feeling that sable palms are not an attractive palm, and unless the fronds and the seed roots are constantly maintained and are not recommending them, because first of all, they've been overused in this area, and all you have to do is drive down to DeSoto to see that. As far as the issue of uniformity, we chose to define that as uniformly beachside. And we've selected a grouping of trees, palms, and underplantings that we think will get that job done. And what we envision is that not all of these plants will be used on every corner. Depending on the size of the area you have to deal with, visibility issues, you'll select various plants. But then those plants will be repeated on down A1A. The trees that we selected was the Geiger, which is being used on Cassia, the East Palatka holly, which is an evergreen that's used widely in this area, and a sand live oak, which is a large tree. The palms, we selected a spindle palm, a buccaneer palm, and a red latan. For underplantings, we selected dwarf Indian hawthorn, pink muhlygrass, dianella, pudica, which is an evergreen plumeria, gazanias, partridge pea, kuntis, and blue porterweed. Now, some of these were selected for attractions to bees and butterflies, which we're hoping to include in this. Some of these underplantings, like the kunti, are very structured, and when you have a specific size area you want to use, you can go to a plant like that. Partridge pea is used along a lot of roadside areas for erosion control and roadside beautification. That's the yellow one down there. Dianella, you see it's a flax, grows, it's used a lot around here, but it's pretty because of the coloration. Pink muhlygrass, I have to admit, is one of my favorites. From the beginning of October to the end of October, it blooms that beautiful mauve pink, and it just sways in the breeze, and it looks so attractive. Dwarf Indian hawthorn is, again, a very stable plant down here because, disease resistant, and we're suggesting the the dwarf, because of the area, again, the size of the areas we'd probably be dealing with. And of course, the one in the middle is the pudica. Gazanias are widely used around here and are very, very colorful. And all of these plants are durable. That's the most important thing. Do you have any questions?
Does anybody on the board here have questions at this time?
At this time, no.
I do.
Okay.
Judy, I noticed in the May 28th memo that was sent by Mr. Stone to the beautification board that they mentioned queen palms, foxtail, and royal palms. And and that you did not select any of those. Why was that?
Queen palms have come in line for a disease lately. You'll notice that we're losing them, particularly like on my street. I live on Sherwood, which 10 years ago when we moved in there were queen palms all down that street, and they're slowly dying off. I can't remember the exact name of the disease, but it is affecting queen palms. The sable palms, as I said, we don't think they're attractive palms unless they're highly maintained.
What about the foxtail and the royal?
Foxtails, I'm not sure why I can't remember why we didn't go with a foxtail. I would have to look at the dimensions in this.
I think it's very attractive.
I do too, I like it. I have one at my house.
And the royal also.
The royal palms are the tall, you're talking about the tall,
I think.
yeah.
And I agree with you about the sable palms. They're
Well, good, I'm glad.
basically unsightly.
Yeah.
Give me just a second here. What do you think of the suggestion to extend not just at Magellan and Sunrise, but also to the north side of Elwood?
There is an area on the north side of Elwood that, one of the things we realized in this project is that we're not exactly always talking about on A1A. From what I understand, it could be close to A1A. And someone on the CRA suggested sable palms on the north side of Elwood to match the palms that are on the south side of Elwood.
Okay.
And, you know, in a situation like that where you're going for a particular look, I don't think I would have a real heartache with that. But they have to be maintained. And, you know, we worked with Phil here and talking about plants that we were going to choose and trying to eliminate a lot of this maintenance issue where, you know, fronds have to be cut, and you take the red latan and the buccaneer and the spindle. They're all self-cleaning, so to speak. Nobody has to go up there and cut fronds. So those are the kinds of things we were looking at.
And so when CRAC made the recommendation that we add sable palms and we add Elwood, the idea was to put the sable palms at Elwood and not in Magellan or...
I don't know what they just said at the meeting that I attended that they wanted sable palms added to the list and cordgrass.
And what do you think of the cordgrass?
If I had my choice between that and the pink newlygrass, I'd rather have pink newly. You're going for a look here. You're going for something that you're not going to see everywhere. If you go down to, I've used this as an example, just go to Lowe's, and on their main drive-in from A1A, there's a grouping of plants in there. And they all say beachside. They're all tropical, pretty plants. And then you go around to their other entrance on Pine Tree, I guess it is, and there's another grouping of plants, not exactly the same thing they have at the main entrance, but it also says beachside. And what we're looking for is that kind of a look.
Okay.
And we don't want something that looks like we went for the cheapest thing on the list. We don't want it to look cheap. We want people to drive down that street and go, oh, that grows here, that's pretty.
Yeah. I guess, John, this is more a question to you. The way this was written here, this memo, it says that CRAC did not recommend delaying the project. In reality, CRAC never addressed that according to their minutes, and it was certainly not in their motion. So I'm not sure that they took a position contrary
They didn't talk about it. They didn't make it part of the motion. That's essentially how they did address it, by not including it in their motion to postpone it. Follow what I'm saying?
And to address it, they basically made their recommendation, and they did not include the beautifications board's recommendation to delay it, because they did not want it delayed.
Essentially, they kind of modeled their motion after the beautifications, and then they modified it.
John, you need to talk into a microphone.
So what they did is they modeled their motion after the beautification board's motion, and then they modified it according to what they were wanting, and which is where they added the sable palms and the north side of Elwood and the cord grass. And also, they did not put in that motion about delaying the project until after the DOT project is done. That was how they responded to that.
Lorraine, I sit on,
Recommendation by omission, right?
Well, essentially, if you look at how it was originally directed to them, I'm sorry, did you have a point?
I'm the liaison to that board, and their talk through more than one meeting was to have this as a project that is now and not to be delayed. They've said that quite a few times. And one thing on that, and I don't want to interrupt you if you still have more. I spoke with Courtney quite a few times and John on this, that none of the area that this is going in is anywhere near what DOT would be in their way, because it's not part of the project. They're only doing a resurfacing project. So this area is not included on any of their plans. I made sure I asked that to Courtney and to John on that, because I read this and said, okay, wait a minute. If they are going to be doing this project, is this going to be in any way in the way? And the answer was no.
What we could do is that the idea behind this project, it's all in city right-of-way, and the advisory committee wanted to see a project done quickly to show some, immediate improvements in the district. But what we could do is before, when the board decides on an intersection, we could pose the question to DOT to make sure the area will not be impacted, and just do that extra, ask that extra question to be sure. But in DOT projects, they don't impact anything besides their own right-of-way. And if they do, they would lease those properties if they have staging areas or anything like that. So they're very careful with that. They would not impact anything beyond their right-of-way.
A curb-to-curb or a resurfacing only.
Yeah.
One other question I had concerning the plants was when they said sand oaks and you showed the picture, that's a pretty good-sized tree.
It is.
When you put that at an intersection, my question would be, does it meet all the site triangles and so forth if you put a tree like an oak tree on a corner?
Well, to answer the question is, it certainly could impact the visibility triangle. When we actually get down to the specifics of that site, that will have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. We kind of put that in there for if you need a bigger tree scenario.
So your list, and here's the way I look at these lists. The beautification board came up with theirs, and CRA added a couple. But that by no means they have to use them. It just gives them a bigger pool of plantings to pick from. And in your case, if we have the existing on one side of the road and we want to match it on the other side, if we leave it out, then they're not going to be able to use it. If we put it in, then they can choose from this pot of trees, because you had mentioned on one corner it already exists and you might want to match it. Well, then if we want to match it, then we probably need to have it in our motion that they can use it.
We just didn't want to see sable palms, the avenue just plugged with sable palms, and it just wouldn't make a good impression.
We kind of already talked about this, and this is going to be my comment later on. John and Courtney, I think if you guys can work with DOT and find out specifically what they're going to do, I think that's important. I don't want to see us delay this, because what happens is it gets delayed, and then it comes up again, and everybody says, well, let's revisit the whole thing, and it's got to start all over, and that happens time and time again. because that's kind of the way government works. It recycles it and looks at it again. And I think if we've got something good here and you guys can kind of clear the landscape, so to speak, with DOT, then let's do this thing, because I think it would be important at this point to turn some dirt, for lack of better words, and get it going.
I think one of the takeaways, by running it through these two boards, particularly the beautification board, is that we had potentially 13 access points, 13 intersecting roads to look at, which the board, they went through every one of them laboriously, and they came up with Sunrise, Magellan, and added Elwood to it. I think that's the true takeaway. We know where to start now.
Okay.
And we pared it down to those 2 or 3, and we got some plant choices here that maybe we can massage a little bit. For instance, there's some concerns about the root ball of some of these larger trees and how they're going to impact sidewalks and the roadway, and we need to look at that as well.
Yeah, well, again, the only large tree, well, I don't think, we have Geigers planted over here on Cassia that are close to a sidewalk, and I don't envision that as an issue, or the East Palatka holly. The sand live oak could. So, the other issue with the sand live oak is the acorns drop and they will stain concrete, the tannin, and it will stain concrete. So, it has to be used in a special area. But it's very highly resistant to wind. So, you kind of trade things off.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Please.
I noticed it as one thing you said, I know we're kind of talking about it here, you said it was a unanimous agreement that no work should be done. What were your reasons that you didn't want this to start?
The obvious, that plants would be put in, DOT would come along, and not intentionally, but unavoidably, destroy them. And they're going to start from in 16? So these trees, these plantings will not get a real strong foothold. And I almost don't see how it couldn't happen. In the areas where we would be planting directly on A1A, as I said, in some of these cases, we're talking about off the corner. So, no, in those cases, for instance, Elwood, I don't see where it would be impacted there. But in other cases, we kind of highlighted an area on Sunrise here. I don't know if have you got these?
Yes.
Yes.
Which would be really close to the corner.
Yeah, that's actually right away, of A1A.
Yeah, so,
And that would have to wait. If it's in the right of way of A1A, we would actually be required to wait. So if it's off the right of way and on city right of way, then we can plant right away.
now, the same thing on Magellan, it's off the corner. Both sides. One side is a little closer, but, you're dealing with driveways and owner signs and in some cases, some of these areas have swales where you're not going to be able to plant. And I don't know if the recommendation for the use of cordgrass was intended for those swales. Did you get a feel for that?
I think I think it was intended to be like if you look at Elwood and you see the staggered palms, to be in between that.
That's what was going on the other side.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that was a very specific recommendation for that very specific roadway. I don't think that there was an intention to spread the same thing throughout, So I think in that, like the plant recommendations, I think the boards kind of marry and complement each other. I think really the only conflict was the delay of the recommendation.
So I would assume then if we decide to go forward with this, but we can do it in a manner of, let's start with those areas that should have the least impact to guarantee success, I guess is what I'm really looking for, to guarantee their success, and those areas that could be a problem or closer to A1A, we can make sure that's kind of done at the end of the project so that like she said, obviously, yeah, I want to spend the money, and all of a sudden they get trashed. But if we can do it in a manner where we could use this in a systematic way of things we know aren't going to be in the way, start with those, and then those that we're looking at a problem, we would save those to the end, I think that would probably be the best way to go forward with it.
Good thing.
And I would also like to see, have us confine those sable palms to Elwood. I agree with the beautification board that that's not a particularly attractive tree, but it would work on Elwood since it's going to be across the street from a bunch of sable palms.
Let me open it up for public comment on this agenda item. Public comment is open for anyone who'd like to speak on agenda item 4. Hearing none, bring it back to the board. I'd like to make sure we have, we have a list that works, so if it's in the list, they can use it. And I'm not a very good person at plants and so forth, but what I don't want to do is put some restriction on them that's so tight that when they do come to an intersection and so forth, if they want to add something that it looks good, for them to have that ability. And that's why I kind of like the expanded. Not that I'm a great fan of having a ton of the cordgrass, but where it's needed, it's okay. If it's not needed, fine, and I don't think I'm the person there. I think our landscape staff and Alan's group could really look at each of those intersections and pick the best plants and trees for that particular section. And I just don't want to narrow them down so much that, they get stuck and have to come back and say, can we add this? So that's, I leave it into people who are a lot better, being, the guys at Allen and so forth, and beautification board and so forth, taking a look at these intersections and say, yes, we're going to do them. Here's the list of plants that we're going to use and what works at each of these intersections. And they might be different. Probably are in some cases. So if there's swales and it needs something else, it's not going to take an oak tree there. So, I'd rather give them the benefit of having a list to pick and then knowing what our feeling is of how to use those things. Let them use them in their best ability.
May I make a motion?
Please.
I move that we accept the beautification board's recommendation as to plant selections and to the location on Magellan and Sunrise, and that we add to that the sable palm and the cordgrass and the north side of Elwood, and that in terms of the timing, that we proceed where it will, as soon as possible, where it will not be detrimental to the plants, and hold off onto the areas where the FTOT project would interfere.
Second. I have a motion by Vice Chair Gott and a second by Board Member Brimer. Any further discussion? Madame Lenore?
Steve Osborne,
Yes.
Mark Weimer.
Yes.
Lynn Dodd,
Yes.
Chairman Patino.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Alan, staff. Thank you very much. The Beautification Board, thank you. Please continue to work with them when the project starts. Moving on to agenda item 5, board members' comments.
Nothing.
Okay. Moving on, item 6, adoption of minutes. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Brimer. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Hosmer. I got to remember that there, I'm sorry.
I'll help you.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Lenore?
Lynn Dodd,
Yes.
Steve Osborne,
Yes.
Mark Weimer.
Yes.
Chairman Patino.
Yes, motion passes, or excuse me, minutes pass. Any further business before the meeting?
Thank you, Judy.
For the board, excuse me?
No.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned. We'll start at 1:45. Is that our first interview? We'll only have one interview tonight. Neil Johnson's at the EDC. He was one of the,
Is he the one that's coming?
he's the one